have alternative newspapers. So most people have the television, if they can, et cetera, et cetera. So when the media is literally owned by the family who are in power, and Vice President Santos has also been accused within the parapolitical scandal that he was having meetings with paramilitaries during the 90s, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a huge impact of why a lot of what we read, and when we go home tonight, when we go online, we read the paper, whatever, is the media ownership is dramatically undemocratic. In addition to that, I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, I wanted to address James, because at the beginning of your introduction, you asked the question, is this Scott Rice's document, is this just a piece of propaganda, or is this a sided democratic discussion? And I wanted to point out one part on page 2 where it seems like a piece of propaganda that's designed to induce guilt. About 3/4 of the way down the page, he says, Canadians as good people cannot morally be justified in doing nothing. If any member of Parliament or any Canadian is concerned about human rights in Colombia, we have an obligation to engage Colombia more deeply. And if you go to the last page, he's more specific with what he meant by more deeply. In the last paragraph, he says, now is the time for Canadians who are sincerely concerned about the well-being of the Colombian people to economically engage them. So he's more explicit in what he means by engage them more deeply. And so in light of your remarks about, or your question about whether this was propaganda or not, I just wanted to ask you the question, do you think that Canadian citizens, or citizens in general, global citizens, as perhaps we should consider ourselves sometimes, have the obligation to do something in the face of atrocities elsewhere on the planet?
Yeah. Right on. Yeah, fantastic. I think if we knew, I would think a lot of Canadians would respond. I think part of the issue is we don't know what's really going on in many parts of the world, especially when it comes to international trade and development and whatnot. So I think if we did know, a lot of us would be concerned. And I think that's a fantastic quote. And that's what it's about. It's like, let's really break down what we're being told. So we're Colombian people to economically engage them, because that coffee farmer who made a cent off that coffee clearly doesn't work hard, right? He clearly, when he grows the plant, when he picks the cherry, when he pops the seed out, when he dries the seed, when he roasts it, clearly he's not working as hard as us Canadians, right? So well done. Now, the response to what we can do, I think we need to be informed, and I think we need to have a culture of democratic discussion. And I think Emma's statement, and tomorrow is a real opportunity, is do we engage, as beautifully put, in privatization of democracy, or do we celebrate public participation? So I think tomorrow in Canada, the practical thing, and in this region, we need to show up the bells on it.
Sure.
That those bells are heard throughout the community. Make sure that the local newspapers are aware, that the letters are coming in, because it's not just doing the event, it's making sure everybody is aware of it.
As some people may know, in the past 2 weeks, 4 people in Halifax were charged in connection to the Atlantica protests that happened a few years ago. 3 of them were charged with unlawful assembly. 1 was charged with concealing a weapon, which happened to be a marble he had in his pocket. So my question is, clearly this was used to set an example for people who plan to speak out in the future about such agreements that happen behind closed doors. And I'm wondering if you could talk on what these agreements mean for our rights as Canadians, for example, our right to protest and our right to freedom of speech.
Well, it's the criminalization of dissent, but the agreements are much broader than that. This gets us back to the discussion around NAFTA, around the SPP, around the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, all providing for substantial investor rights and all of them having some impact on the democratic rights we enjoy. And these agreements are always sold with the idea, well, it's economic progress, we're engaging economically. Then we look at the actual reality of what has happened in Canada over the 20 years of these agreements. And Janet referenced this at the beginning of the talk tonight. What we've actually seen for the average Canadian family is about 2/3 of them are poor. And the poorest Canadians are dramatically poor. 300,000 homeless across this country, because for that bottom 20% of Canadians, their incomes have basically bottomed out. Same thing with the middle class. Same thing with everything except the top 20% who've seen their income skyrocket. And so the average Canadian family has now twice the debt load that it had 20 years ago. What we're seeing, and this is in real terms, right? What we're talking about is that Canadians are maintaining their prosperity desperately through working harder, longer and longer working weeks when they have a job, and going increasingly into debt. It has not brought prosperity, it's brought the exact opposite. And the Colombia trade deal is the same intent. It is to further the wealthy, the corporate CEOs, corporate lawyers, they're doing better than ever. But for the rest of us, for most of us, what it means is having a harder and harder time. And increasingly we speak out about this, but we've got a media that generally does not allow the kind of free and open debate that even we can have tonight. So there is a progressive attempt to try to take out social and economic policy from the public sphere and privatize it within trade agreements. And this is why it's so important to fight back and establish new principles around fair trade that most Canadians would adhere to.
Just a couple of things in regard to your question. Well, where are we with the ability to protest? And I think Montebello, the Montebello Summit was a little bit of a turning point when they discovered the agent provocateur from the Ontario Police amongst them. And I think that has influenced thinking on this a tremendous amount. Most people did not believe you if you said something like that could happen, but they got the picture. I just saw on the news last night that Professor Byers and somebody else from the university there they have a committee, a kind of civil liberties committee, where they're trying to get some public space for protesters that want to protest the Olympics. And it sounded like they'd made some headway on that, and that they had some agreements with the mayor, and they were trying to educate, the police and the protesters to really try to be as peaceful as possible. And I know that from the activist community, that's been going on. There's a huge attempt to ensure peaceful protests whenever they have them. There may be a few sometimes that move in and try to destroy that and burn a few flags, but generally speaking, that's the name of the game. So it is frightening, though, to go out on the streets if you think you're going to be attacked in the way that that's happened. Interesting that we're just 10 years from the Battle of Seattle, when that all really became in the public consciousness, and we saw the film Democracy in Action afterwards that showed what was really going on there. So anyway, I think that we have to keep there, and groups like the Council of Canadians and others that have sponsored this tonight are going to be, ensuring that we have that public presence.
Me? Yeah, I wanted to go back to the very first question actually about this either or, whether we should go to the demonstrator or quietly talk with him. First of all, I say